Quantum Computing for Babies. And here is the book that we used on quantum computing for babies. And, it starts off talking about bits. And then we get to, quantum bits and how computers solve problems. So, Kirsty, what do you think about quantum computing for babies?
I think it's a misnomer because it covers quite some topics in detail that a few adults could learn from as well. I think
Yeah.
even if you're comfortable with the idea of bits, and few people are, but qubits is a whole nother level, the quantum bits. And I think it describes it in a very nice visual way. So anyone who's vaguely interested in the topic, I think it's a good book to start off.
Have you read Quantum Computing for Babies? Do you own the book?
Yeah, I have read it. I think there's a whole series recommended to some of my friends who are parents. You can have Pythagorean theorem for babies. There's a whole range of maths, physics books for babies.
Baby
I think because
University.
you can get an over focus on animal noises, and it's good to introduce them to qubits and parallel processing when they're very young.
Can I just ask about this, Kirsty? Because as an engineer, I don't have enough time to work in quantum and really study it, but I just read what I can. So in this discussion, I am the baby, and I thought quantum for babies was just really talking about just a nice polite way of saying quantum for dummies, but not being derogatory, not being insulting to people. But I got my head round qubits and what quantum for babies is telling you. But qubits is like a spinning coin. It's heads and tails in a supposition, and then you commit an act of measurement. So you actually try and pin down a value, and then it causes a qubit to collapse. I didn't see or read any of this in quantum for babies like I would expect in quantum for dummies, or how that leads to quantum parallelism. I can't even say that word, which is the whole art is multiple calculations at the same time, which I'm really fascinated by, but I'm just completely stumped. I'm sorry, quantum for babies did not help me get there.
I think if you're already quite advanced and you know about things like superposition and measurement collapsing the state of a quantum bit, maybe you don't need to start with quantum for babies. Maybe it's more like quantum for teenagers, or
Quantum
for
toddlers.
first quantum.
Yeah. I see.
Like a bit further along, But exactly what you're saying. This is kind of introducing the idea. For a lot of people, they can't hold the idea that bits can exist in neither 0 nor 1, yet both at the same time. The whole idea is crazy.
It's sort of magical in a way as well, isn't it? I find
like
it
all
really...
technology, it's just magic.
Yeah, but also, can you explain a little bit about entanglement and how that actually works in practice? I've seen lots of people, pictures of people wearing these kind of scanning things on their head for brain scans, and the idea that two particles can know each other and be connected so that they always know where each other are, so that you can look inside people's heads or deeply underground or around corners. Is that really true?
Yeah.
Good, thank you very much.
Maybe we could talk, because I think perhaps even if your listeners have read Quantum for Babies, they won't know about superposition and collapsing of measurements.
Maybe you do the definitions bit? Yes.
Yeah, quick 101. So superposition is where the qubits are both in 0 and 1. They don't have a fixed state. And then, as you said, Lucien, when you measure them, or when you observe, when you look, they collapse to one of those states. Then their state becomes fixed, so 0 or 1.
So that would be a bit like if a qubit is a spinning coin, it's actually the moment you slap it on your hand, it's committed to being either heads or tails.
We have
exactly,
a
and this is
animation
Schrödinger's cat, which is kind of famous. That the cat is both alive and dead until you look in the box, and then it collapses to one of those states. So that's why everyone talks about Schrödinger's cat.
Yeah, I never really understood the cat's bit.
Well, we've got an animation of a qubit, which is for our video essay on quantum computing for babies. So this is made by our animator. And I asked for this to be made. And Kirsty, do you think this is a good representation of a qubit? Is there anything you'd change, some feedback?
It's not bad, is it? I suppose it's quite tough to represent such an abstract concept for many people. I think that theta angle dancing around the middle might scare a few folks off. It's exactly this idea, right, that it's living somewhere in this sphere, and this is a 3-dimensional representation. Of course, it can be much higher than that. So it's it's just sort of this randomness that picture is depicting, I suppose. And so then going back to Emily's point, entanglement is how you can have two qubits that can be really some distance apart. And they are, when you measure one, it collapses to that state, and the other one will do the same thing. So this is how a lot of people envisage key sharing in the future, that you have a quantum kind of key on one end of a wire, and as soon as anybody looks at it, it will collapse to this state, and that same key exists at the other end of that entangled wire.
And
So
I'm quite
it's pretty
keen
crazy.
to sort of steer the conversation. So in my video essay, Quantum Computing for Babies, I argue that everyone gets quite tied up in all these specifics, all the quantum mechanical concepts like entanglement and like qubits, and actually it's kind of important to not get too lost in the technical details when there are big issues like post-quantum cryptography. What are your views on that, Kirsty?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that when we talk about this, it's really important to focus on the outcomes. And quantum computers sound very cool, you know, the number of qubits is increasing, but what does it really mean? And the biggest application for cryptographers is that it will break all of our cryptography that is currently used on the internet today if we have a large enough quantum computer. Now, we're nowhere near that at the moment, but it could happen. It may never happen, also, just to say, but it could happen in the future. No one really knows when. Maybe most estimates say about 10 to 15 years away, but that has been the estimate for the last sort of 30 years, and we still don't have a quantum computer. So that's one major application of quantum computing for cryptographers. But in all sorts of applications, you know, in medicine, as with any kind of advancing computing, there are lots of applications to a wide range of sectors. But the one that I'm really interested in is the encryption side.
Yeah. Kirsty, can I just pick up on the encryption side? Because as we both have had some experience or looking at the digital standards arena, and there is a lot of activity in those arenas around trying to standardize the next stage of encryption, the way that we protect our secrets online. Could you just give a little bit of an introduction of, you know, imagining that 10 or 15 year horizon does actually happen? We have quantum computing in our lives. What will it do to strong encryption, the way that we protect our secrets, our security, our bank accounts, and what needs to happen and who needs to take action now to protect those secrets?
Yeah, it's such a range of things because cryptography covers, you know, key exchanges, it covers signatures, which is a way of authenticating and saying I am who I say I am, and verifying. It covers, you know, block ciphers like AES, which just encrypts lots of material at once, and it covers as well. And all of these are differently vulnerable to quantum computing. So it's not just everything needs replacing immediately. There's a phase and a stage to go through. And the main thing that's affected is the way we protect information and the way that we prove we are who we say we are. So for most people, this probably looks like software updates on your phone, actually. That update comes from a trusted source. You know it's come from Google or Samsung or whoever, and you can download that update. And that method of proving that it is really Google pushing out this update to you, that's vulnerable to quantum computing. And so is the encryption, the way we keep our information secret online. And so for banks, it's a good example because you probably have a mortgage that lasts many years. If you only have a mortgage that lasts 1 year, good for you. But most people's financial information, bank accounts and loans and stuff, it's sensitive for a long time, for their lifetime. And so because that's such a long period of time, even though 10 to 15 years sounds like a long way away, it's not when you consider it in that context. So large organizations need to plan. They need to plan to be able to migrate. Right now, we don't have quantum cryptography algorithms embedded in protocols. We do have the algorithms themselves standardized, but we don't have a new internet standard for how to use these quantum algorithms. But organizations still need to plan. So today they need to look at the assets they have. They need to think about what needs to migrate, what's a priority, how long it will take to migrate those assets. You know, if it takes 10 years to migrate your assets, you're already too slow if you've not started. So you really have to make sure your timeline fits. For the average individual, you should probably do nothing. Your organizations and banks, they should be taking care of this for you. But if you're a bit of a nerd, it's just quite interesting to know that this is coming.
So it's time to plan, time to prepare, and your assumption is that this is coming. We're nowhere near a quantum computer yet, but there's a kind of race. You mentioned another thing in the bones of doing this and planning is standards. Where are we at with standards? Because they can be effectively weaponized by organizations so that they capture the standards that matter. And if we think about the physical engineering behind quantum, you're already looking at a battle or a race between the classics, superconducting qubit versus the sort of trapped ion qubit, which is happening in Oxford. So how you actually do this is still up for grabs, isn't it? And the standards around that. In our world, in tackling scams and fraud, we know that people are urging us to do first and standardize second because we need to get on with it. What's your view on the standardizations around quantum?
Yeah, it's a very good question because usually we have standards when there's a need to be open and interoperable in an ecosystem, right? So the internet, for example, just would not work if my browser connected to the internet to a different way to everyone else's browser in the world, and everyone had their own little version of how that worked, and that would be terrible, right? The internet works because it's built on robust standards that interoperate. And for quantum, the way that I might design a quantum computer is proprietary, and it would be different to how you might standardize a quantum computer. So I think in terms of creating a quantum computer, maybe there's no need for standards yet. We're still very much in exploration phase. We're still academic research. Some very large players are making big leaps, but this is very proprietary, and they're investing a lot of money to do that. Whereas standards on how the internet will work and how that cryptography needs to interoperate, that is a good place to do standardization, right? Because if you want a bank to have their website using Post Quantum Cryptography, they should be using an approved standard, and so that you get the same experience no matter what bank you are going to. So it's a different picture, really, depending on what you're trying to standardize. But no doubt standards are important. They build our ecosystem. If you're interested in where the future of technology is going, standards are a great place to look, because what's being worked on now will actually happen in 2 or 3 years' time. And so it's a great place to kind of have a crystal ball and look into the future of where we're going.
Do you think this is a technology where one winner will take all?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we're probably going to have, between very few players, sort of, I don't want to say arms race because that implies it's going to be weaponized, but I think there will be a capability race. It's sort of like we see with AI, actually. There are a few very well-known large language models, and we see some organizations, creating narrow language models, and that's the corner of the market they're trying to dominate. And I think we'll see a sort of federated approach with coverage of the market. I do think there are very few players who have the resources to make a quantum computer at any kind of scale. So we already have quantum computers that exist, but the qubit size is far too small to be relevant to attack cryptography. Sorry, but we will see that improve. It's just whether we will see it.
I wonder if we'll see that breakthrough also happening with AI kind of at the same time. So when Oxford Ionics, which we were super excited about, charged atoms suspended in a vacuum using electromagnetic fields, and how that created greater stability in the whole process, and therefore cheaper. Who's going to win, and whether people are almost there and they're just holding back and waiting for some other player to come forward, a bit like we're seeing with OpenAI and Gemini, and as you say, things happening in that. Alice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just interested in, I think it's IBM have got a quantum computer with about 1,100 qubits. I might have misremembered that. What do you think about, the power of that computer? Is it going to be capable of hacking into all the banks, or is there still some work that needs to be done to?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, it's nowhere near. I mean, for a cryptographically relevant computer, you're talking millions of qubits. And the other thing is, once the computer arrives, that's one thing. And it's not just qubits alone, it's quality of those qubits as well. And the engineering, becomes more unstable the more qubits you have, because they're all interacting with each other in this small space, and it's not linear. So it's not like previous, classical computers where you can just add memory or add storage and it's quite linear. If you add more storage, it doesn't really affect the stability of your existing storage. It just doesn't work like that. So yeah, we're nowhere near, but that's not to say the advancements aren't exciting. I think it's very cool. And I think there's a lot of progress that has been made. I think we're probably more likely to see kind of step changes rather than a linear or exponential growth. I think we will see major breakthroughs that really change the game. And as I say, it's not just about qubits, it's also about quantum gates, and there are different algorithms to be developed on this too. And then the final thing is that once you have a quantum computer, it doesn't mean you can program it or code it, right? Like we had to have Ada Lovelace invent binary for us to be able to really use computers in an efficient way and understand how they work. And there has to be this whole body of work to be done there. How do you even program Shor's algorithm on a quantum computer? What's the language? What do you do that in? How does it run? So there's a few different aspects that I think still need to be worked out, but it's definitely very cool.
Kirsty Paine, this is a fascinating subject, and we're going to hear more. At the beginning, you gave a time sort of a horizon of like 10 years, at least 10 years. I'm thinking back to 2015, and I almost say it's 2015 when I'm talking about the current year over the phone. It feels so close, and I think when we're thinking about other major political developments, 10 years is not long. And so I wanted to leave one question for people listening now or in the future. Quantum computers, what do you think is the reality of this coming into production soon? And as Kirsty alluded, there's a gap between a quantum computer existing somewhere in the world and that coming onto a desktop. So again, asking you, what do you think the chances of you being able to use a quantum computer as an individual? And we talk about it hacking into cryptography and computers and banks and things, but actually if you think about all the other benefits of being able to do computation in such speed and scale, it proves hugely exciting. I mean, we're running AI algorithms here at the Global Signal Exchange that take 24 hours to run, and then you realize you've got something wrong in the seeding of the algorithm. If I could do that in a burst in seconds, I would find that super exciting. So thanks very much. That's a really fascinating topic. So it's now time for our guilty pleasure online. Kirsty Paine, Field CTO at Splunk. What is your guilty pleasure online?
Obviously, like most people, I have many. When I was first asked this, I instantly thought of the Zoom beauty filter, because I think that's so useful. You're having a rough day at work, you turn up, and
we were talking about this just before the show, and I was like, oh God, our lives are so sad that it's like our guilty pleasures are like, oh, on a Teams call, I can put a really funny filter on.
No, I'm sorry.
So what does it do, Kirsty? What does the beauty filter do? I'm not asking for a friend here. If you happen to have forgotten to, do your face and you realise you've got a very important call, tell me what the beauty filter does to you.
Well, you can choose. I mean, by the way, this isn't going to be my guilty pleasure.
I picked up on that.
Oh, right. Sorry. Okay, let's
We've
get
all
on to your
become quite hysterical about this. We all really want to hear about this.
Okay, we can park it.
Your appearance, and it just sort of smooths out, any wrinkles, any blemishes, and you can choose. So you can have it like really full, or you can bring it back to 0 if you're brave. And it's really interesting in the morning. You just think, well, I had to touch up.
Wow.
Kirsty, you know that this is going to become our Insta clip.
That isn't even Kirsty's guilty pleasure. What is your actual guilty pleasure?
Well, my actual guilty pleasure, is newer. And it's because for Splunk, we actually partner with McLaren. And so I started following McLaren on my favourite social media channel. And they put out reels and videos about the engineering of McLaren cars. And there's all kinds of cool stuff, you know, like Lando Norris is there talking about his seat and how it's like engineered to be perfect for him, and explaining all the different parts and how it's been made. And it's quite nerdy, but it's quite cool because I know nothing about aerodynamics and car design and Formula One. And it's just such a good way to get engaged and interested in the technology behind the sport. So McLaren's Instafeed is probably my actual guilty pleasure.
You know, this is very dangerous that Lucien now knows about this.
Well,
because
this is huge news for me, because my management mentors are in this order: Taylor Swift, and then the Formula One team. And I know this because Emily's father died last year. Fantastic guy, an engineer, and he was talking about the Children's Hospital Great St Ormond's and how they got the Formula One team in to help them manage child operations. It was absolutely incredible that, you know, that teamwork, how to change a wheel really quickly, and all of this stuff. So they're fantastic at these sort of rather abstract activities that inform so much about what we all do. So I think the McLaren thing, I'm super interested in that. That's a great guilty pleasure online. I may join you.
Yeah, I do. I was sorry to hear about your father as well, Emily, but I think just in terms of the McLaren stuff, like it's impressive the way a pit crew operates. Like you said, you know, you have 3 people on a tire and they know exactly what they're doing, and you could watch pit stops honestly constantly because it's so impressive the agility they move with. But actually the way pit crews kind of work, they're always communicating, they're always collaborating, they have lots of tooling and practice, and there's so much we could learn in the tech space from that, you know, like McLaren Formula One is so innovative that the car changes from the start to the end of the season. It's about 80% of the car has changed. Wow. 80% of that car, and that's crazy. Can you imagine you from the start to the end of the year, you know, your office or your home changed 80%. It's such a pace of innovation. It's very inspiring.
Oh, thank you very much, Kirsty. I am on the select committee for the Christmas special on Guilty Pleasure Online, and you will definitely be getting my vote for that. That's actually, I really join you there. There's you know, we've had lots of doom scrolling and stuff like that, but this one is totally up there. So we've been talking about the UK Online Safety Act and its impact generally on children. And I was really fascinated, we are all fascinated to hear from Kirsty about her thoughts on this, about whether this is going to be a mechanism that really helps protect children. Alice, you had some questions on this topic for Kirsty.
Yeah, so Kirsty, while I was sort of talking to you before, you used the term sharenting. And I had never heard of sharenting before.
What is that?
So what is it, Kirsty? Can you explain it to us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the new, I suppose, digital version of sharing your parenting online. So videos and reels of your children, babies, toddlers being posted online. And, you know, I'm sure we all know proud parents who love to share what their children are up to. But this is a new version of putting this just available publicly, openly online. And so, as you said, I used to work for UK government. I was very involved in online safety and the policy around that. So it's a topic that I think is pretty important and something I've worked a lot on.
And just to clarify, you said this is a new way. I mean, in the old days, Alice was once a little baby, and we would just without pause just show stuff on our holidays, just put snaps, and there was this old thing called Facebook, which we used to use where we'd swap pictures and stuff. I know things have moved on since then, but this is what we're talking about. That is sharenting.
Yeah, can you? Yes, because I think Lucien's point, to take that on, I think there was a lot of innocent sharenting without, you know, when you are a proud parent yourself, you just think your children are fantastic and that everybody will want to see them just like you want to, you know, just share your joy and love. What's the downside of this, and why has it become a thing called sharenting? Is it about virtue signalling, or is it more sinister than that? Is it actually about putting young people in danger?
It's complex and nuanced, isn't it? So I think absolutely you want to share your photos with your friends and family. That totally makes sense. And we do that in a digital way now. But the difference is when you're putting things on the open internet. So people you don't know, you have never met, in a completely different country to you, can see these photos and videos and then essentially do what they like with them. And so the kind of sinister side of that is that we see a lot of material coming out of AI now for child sexual exploitation material. And that AI has to be trained on some data, pictures of children. And you may not even be thinking about that when you're posting this publicly online. So especially as video editing has got better, you can blur the face of your child or put an emoji on or something, and you're still sharing it in a way that's just a bit more considered, I suppose. And the threat has changed. You know, I think when people were sharing things on Facebook with their friends and family, that's very different to now, where things are being publicly posted on TikTok and you have zero control over what happens to that video once you've posted it. You know, people can make memes, they can add video, music, whatever they want, and kind of mock your child, which you may not even be thinking of now as a parent when you put that stuff
and
online.
Also the AI manipulation of images now is so instant. I mean, Igor, one of our engineers here who normally sits behind the camera, can take snaps from this podcast and just manipulate them and turn them into anything really immediately live. There's a new AI model everyone was talking about last week, which takes pictures of Taylor Swift, and if you want them in spicy mode, she immediately gets undressed, you know. And this is just, and when you start to combine this with pictures of children, aren't we entering into a whole different ball game?
Yeah, the thing with Taylor Swift, she has a public profile, she can control what gets put out of her to a large part. She's also a grown consenting adult, right? So there's a difference between you putting your images online and a 5-year-old who you can't really speak for them in this way. And the thing is that your digital footprint lasts so much longer than if you take a photo and you put it in a photo album and it stays in your cupboard at home, which I know for lots of people it's shocking. You might even print your photos. So who does that? But I do. But I think it's a bit different, you know, the kind of exposure. Maybe people just aren't thinking about it. They're not used to that idea that you know, once you put this photo online, you do lose control over what's happening to it.
I'm really interested in this, just sort of connecting this to the idea of child autonomy, because you kind of mentioned like posting pictures of me online as a child, but social media as it currently exists wasn't a thing until I was about 14. And so you weren't putting pictures of me as a baby or me as a toddler online when I would not have been able to consent to that. By the time,
yes, indeed,
as my parents, you'd upload a picture of me like, oh, we went for a nice barbecue or something, and I was a teenager, I could say like, oh God, that's a terrible picture, can you take that down? And I feel, you know, there's the sort of the exploitation argument, but also just the autonomy argument of like, when you're 5, you can't actually consent to a photo of you being put online. And Kirsty, I'm sort of interested in your view of this, because, you know, as adults, if someone puts a photo of you up that just looks terrible and you're really embarrassed and you're like, oh God, that, you know, that's not a good angle, can you take that down please? We have that autonomy, but child autonomy is quite different. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and the photos and videos that get put up of these children, you know, they're like mostly naked running around or something. If I ever did that and someone put this video up of me, for sure I'd be report, take that down. But you know, it's a different thing. Like the child, like you say, cannot complain, cannot even realize the implication of what's happening. And I know it's tough because, Emily, I think you mentioned virtue signaling earlier. It's not about saying this is, you know, how you should parent your children. They must only eat vegetables and you must never do any of this. I think it's more about knowing the risks and taking a more considered balanced view of it. And in truth, most people don't see any harm in uploading photos or videos of their children to the wide open internet. Even if you were sharing photos on Facebook, I would hope that, you know, back in the day, I would hope that it's with a network of friends, that you've locked down the permissions, and these are all friends you genuinely know in real life. It's not your gardener's, you know, second cousin who you met one time. You know, it's a bit of a different, I mean, not that I have a gardener either, by the way, that's very classist, but you know what I mean, these kind of very tenuous, loose connections. So I think it's just being a bit more mindful. We would never really let our children go out completely unsupervised and hang out with 1,000 total strangers without us being able to see what's happening. And essentially, if you're sharing a video or photo, you have no idea what happens to that video or photo after it's been put up.
Can I just reflect that we've been talking about this subject and about the responsibility sitting with parents alone for keeping their children safe or doing the right thing, and I quite agree with you that sort of understanding what happens and being mindful about it is important. Is that where the responsibility begins and ends, Kirsty, or do you think there is a role for government, for business, and where does the balance lie, and what do you think would help to keep children safer online?
A couple of levels to answer that. Firstly, if your child goes to school, the school won't take photos of your child and put them online publicly. So schools and other caregiving places aren't doing this. But in terms of educating your children themselves about what is okay online, where they should be looking, where they should not be looking, I think largely that lies with parents. But of course, schooling, environment, other parents as well. You've got children who are peers. Other parents can be very helpful in sharing their best practices and what's worked for them. I think there is an education piece. Lots of that can be done at home. But for parents who aren't digital comfortable, that can be quite tricky. How do they really know what is possible if they're not involved in these kind of social media things themselves, or just the internet generally? I know this is called the internet seriously, but the internet generally is quite a topic for a lot of adults and grandparents, of course. When I say parents, I'm referring to all caregivers. It's not just, the traditional biological parent. It's anybody who has a role in that child's upbringing and well-being. So absolutely, I think there's a lot we can be doing, making the conversation normal, just making sure that children have a safe space to discuss what their parents want to talk about, what they want to talk about, what their friends are doing, what they've heard about, just like any aspect of parenting, right? You just want to bring your children up right. And I think digital comfort is something we should be trying to pass on to our children and try to get them engaged with what's going on, and make sure that they feel comfortable and secure and confident when they're dealing with the internet.
Do you think that the internet, we've seen this landmark UK Online Safety Act, which is seeking to protect children, and you're really talking about a safer, you call it a comfortable space for families, for children. We're also seeing a real backlash and real sort of anger about this from technologists as well. Do you think we're on the right track? I know you can't really answer for Splunk. Do you think the technology is in place? We're clearly moving towards age verification of some sort and digital identity and dependency on that. And what about the other side of that we end up sort of over depending upon digital identity, and that becomes a fantastic key to do what you like once you're in?
Yeah, I think the technologists are quite often pointing out the flaws, right? You can get around age verification. Well, of course you can. But the point is, for a child that is unwittingly seeing this kind of content online and they don't want to be seeing it, it will protect them from that accidental harm. And I think part of it is a cultural shift. I remember when ID verification came in for buying alcohol in supermarkets, and it was challenged 25 in the UK. And, if you were actually 21, but you didn't have your ID with you, you looked under 25, you wouldn't be sold that alcohol. And initially, everyone's really grumbling about this. It's so frustrating. Everyone can get around this. Their parents could just buy them alcohol, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, it stopped children whose parents didn't know they were buying alcohol from going into a supermarket and buying alcohol. Was it a perfect system? No. But did it help? Yes. And now almost no one I know grumbles about having to show ID. That's just normal. You buy alcohol, you have to show identification. And I think it will become more of a cultural norm. Right now, we're just seeing it as an inconvenience or a control on our liberty. But actually, legislation exists for a reason. I don't think there's any legislator that says, what I want to do today? I want to make everything more complicated. I want to do more work. And I want to write legislation that is useless and everything.
I agree.
That just never happens. And so this age verification, it exists. Online safety stuff exists because big tech companies weren't being responsible. They weren't taking up, what they should be doing. They weren't doing proper checking. And we did have 9-year-olds accessing things that are supposed to be account restricted for 13 plus. And that's a huge gap in maturity.
Well,
4 years at that
we're
age.
getting word that over 50% of visitors are no longer visiting some of the famous adult sites.
Yes.
Reports this
Yeah,
week.
just to some context on that. Last week, the big news stories about the coming into force of age verification for adult sites led to a huge upsurge in the downloading of virtual private networks. So that's the techie workaround. So you can obscure the VPN, you can obscure who you are and where you're coming from. But this week, the story is that the traffic to those sites has reduced by 50%. So the traffic to the adult sites. And that, I think, I viewed that as the cycle that you described, Kirsty, which is it comes in, massive like shock. Oh my goodness, we have to change. The technical minded people are like, this is the workaround. But it's actually the crunch point is what happens to traffic to that site. So you put yourself at the site itself and the traffic has gone down. What does that tell you about, probably not just underage people, but people who don't want to reveal their identity before accessing that kind of material. So there has been, no doubt there will be a settling down phase, but that says to me that there's some sort of impact going on that was actually the policy objective as well as the opposite of the policy objective.
That leads to a fascinating, and thank you, Kirsty, on that fascinating subject. But that does leave me with an interesting question for our listeners. Listeners, do you trust adult web site managers to manage your digital identity information? Interested to hear from you. Another question that's more pertinent to this topic is, what do you think as a parent about uploading family pictures online? Are those days over? Thank you very much, Kirsty. Finally, before we sign off today, it's time for our Tech Room 101. So, Room 101. I forgot the dramatic theme tune was coming in today, but Tech Room 101 is the tech thing that we want to put in the bin forever. Kirsty Paine, what is your Tech Room 101?
I struggled to think of this instantly, and then I used my computer for about 2 minutes, and I realised exactly what it is. It is the mouse. I would like to put the mouse. I know lots of people say printers. I don't use a printer, but the mouse. Oh my gosh, it just takes up so much real estate on my desk. It's clunky. It's annoying, and I just much prefer a trackpad now. Even if I'm using a computer, I would like to connect a trackpad. I can't deal with the mouse.
Wow.
It doesn't even look like a mouse anymore. It doesn't have the tail, the wire. It's over.
The tail,
Alice,
the wire.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I just don't really use a mouse ever, unless there's like, in the office there is a desk that has a mouse and there's space for it. I haven't really. There's people who will like. I see them in, they're on a train and they like get their laptop out, they get their keyboard, and then they take out their like gaming mouse and they'll just use it on like the side of the chair arm. And I'm like, that is dedication.
You might be sitting
mouse.
next to someone who does that.
Are you a diehard mouse?
Listen, what do you think of Kirsty's Room 101?
I'm feeling a bit picked on and bullied here. I quite like.
Kirsty, what apart from it takes up too much space, what about a mouse do you not like?
What do you like? That's a good question. I mean, the mouse pads that you either have the noise or you have a mouse pad. This mouse pad just feels bad. Takes up.
Oh, I don't like the mouse pad. Yes, I'm with you, but I don't have one of those.
Well, the clicky buttons, aren't they just more tactile? Aren't they just give you some sense of... Are you talking about the trackpad that's in the middle of a laptop?
Yes, but you can get them separately.
Do you have them separately
now? So
is that what you do?
You can have a more dexterous experience. You can swipe across screens and stuff in a MacBook. I mean, I could really go into my dislike of the mouse. I don't know how long this segment's supposed to be, but I think it's just had its day. The little scrolly bit in the middle for people who still have that. Oh, it's just.
Can you just
dirty.
satisfy my curiosity, because I really love stuff and I really love stuff conversations, and I did try a trackpad thing once and I just couldn't stand it immediately. What are you talking about? Do you have a separate physical... What are you talking about?
This is not brand endorsement, but this is an Apple trackpad.
Oh,
So
and that's just a
separate
pad.
Yeah, essentially, and it sits. Look how clean it is. Look how
Nice.
easy that is to clean.
I
It's
am
very clean.
intrigued. Does it have buttons?
You can touch, so it feels like it will do a little click. You know, like you have. But normally you just use 2 fingers to tap, or you know, it's
Yeah.
you can use all instead of just using the 2 at the top like little bunny rabbits. You can have all 4 finger gestures. It's much better.
Oh,
So
right.
yeah, so whatever about quantum, this is the future, right?
It's the past.
Trackpads are the future.
Trackpads have been around since
that
like
still has
the
a mouse.
90s.
Like who brings their little mouse along? You know,
I
who has a
do.
wired mouse?
I do. I bring my wireless mouse
Oh
along,
no,
but I'm going to
now
bring my.
feeling so embarrassed about
the
everything about
trackpad
myself.
Can you actually use the trackpad like a big mouse? Can you move it around? Or...
No, it just silently stays. That's the beauty. It's not dragging itself around, taking up all this real estate on your desk. It is the size that it is. So it's just perfect.
I am intrigued. I'm going to try one. Finally, before we sign off, Kirsty, thank you. Have we got a comment of the week?
Yeah, so this is kind of related to what we were talking about today, and also with the Online Safety Act, you know, always worth touching upon. But, you know, last week we were also talking about, parental controls and, you know, online parenting. And somebody's commented, controversial take, social media should be only for people aged 18 plus. As should anything rated 18 plus, parents should be legally obligated to install passwords to limit access to age-appropriate content.
Wow.
That.
Kirsty, what do you think of that?
It's very strong, isn't it? I think it's very hard to ever comment on other people's parenting. You know, everyone makes choices based on their child, based on their kind of risk profile and what they think. I think that it can be very tough if maybe that person doesn't have a 17-year-old who is driving, who is legally able to work. I think that can be quite tough to enforce. But I think the point is trying to shift some of that responsibility back to parents, or try to think in a very considerate way about the age you need to be to access some of this material. There's no doubt, you know, social media can have a toxic impact, especially on developing minds. So I think that's maybe just encouraging consideration, which is such a wishy-washy way of saying it would depend and vary between every parent, every child. But I think that's a fair.
Thank you very much, Kirsty Paine, and thank you for that generous comment online. Please follow up if you're interested in this. Thank you very much, everybody. We've been talking to the great Kirsty Paine, CTO at Splunk, a fantastic Cisco company, and talking about AI and quantum computing, but also parenting and rather sharenting in the digital age. Thank you very much.